My name is Tom Mapes, and I lead the mining initiative here at the Digital Chamber, which we stood up last July. So we're coming up on a year of our focused mining initiative at the Digital Chamber. We stood it up with to promote the unprecedented opportunity that digital asset mining and Bitcoin mining particularly offer to the energy sector. On the next panel, MacKenzie Sigalos, reporter from CNBC, will be joined by Senator Daines, representing the state of Montana. Senator Daines is a senior member of the Senate Banking Committee, Senate Finance, and Senate Energy Committee, as well as prior to his time in public service was several decades in the tech industry. And they will also be joined by Michael Saylor, the CEO and founder of MicroStrategy, as well as one of the leaders of the Bitcoin Mining Council and a known thought leader throughout the Bitcoin community. So with that, I'll hand it over to the panel.
Hey guys, so I'm a technology reporter at CNBC and I cover cryptocurrency, but half the time I feel like an energy reporter because I'm talking about power grids and oil and gas and baseload demand, creating a financial incentive for renewable energy, and the list goes on. And what I want to talk about today is Bitcoin mining. The narrative usually comes around to energy expenditure, but there's also that factor of utility, and not just the utility of securing a global monetary network, but the utility of how you can fix our energy infrastructure in the US. And we know that there are a lot of problems. You've got residential centers that are too far from power sources. You've got grids that are disconnected. And we also lack financial incentives to create and add renewables to the grid. So I want to just start with, how does Bitcoin mining help fix problems with the energy infrastructure in the US today? Senator or Michael, who wants to kick us off?
I'll start. I think, first of all, Bitcoin mining is the most lucrative use of energy in the world. If you're putting in a megawatt of energy into any industry, the industry that converts it into money most efficiently is Bitcoin. So that's the first observation. The second is it runs on stranded intermittent energy, and in essence, it's the ideal energy recycling technology. So it's a great solution to anyone, anywhere in the world that has either waste energy, intermittent energy, stranded energy, or someone that simply wants to convert energy into the highest, most valuable use.
I will say this, on the wasted energy point, we curtail more energy than Bitcoin mining uses. So there is absolutely a utility there. Senator, is there anything you want to add?
Well, other than one of the unique advantages we have as a country that sets us apart is we've had an abundance of energy. As we look around the world, energy constraints is a huge issue. America has been blessed with abundance. And that gives us the perfect storm as we go forward here as it relates to digital assets to continue to keep that mining here on our shores, because that's an important advantage as it relates to abundant and affordable energy.
And that's, to keep it on our shores. In the last year, we saw this great westernization of hash rate as the Bitcoin mining industry, which is virtually synonymous with proof of work mining. Ethereum still runs on that system right now. They're transitioning in August, it looks like. But I bring that up because the Bitcoin mining industry largely moved from China to the US. And right now what we're looking at is a patchwork of regulation where you have states that have vastly different approaches, whereas Texas and Wyoming are welcoming miners with open arms. I was talking to Senator Lummis this morning about just that. And then you have places like New York, which is currently considering a proof of work mining moratorium. And my question to you, Senator, is you just went to virtually every single country in Eastern Europe in the last 6 weeks. And whereas, national governments have I think you were saying, aggressive policies that sometimes get in the way of, energy efficient policies, where it might be better if it's a bit hands-off. I'll let you get into that. My question is, should we have a national level approach? Like, is this state patchwork approach working?
Well, for background, so in the last 6 weeks, I've been in Poland, Germany, Ukraine, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova. Of course, since February 24th, history changed certainly in Europe. But after we talked through with the prime ministers and presidents the issue of Putin's evil invasion of Ukraine, the next issue that everybody is discussing is what are we going to do about energy? Energy costs are exploding in parts of Europe. Germany's price of electricity is going to quadruple from 2019 into the foreseeable future. This is, energy security is national security. And the problem you have is you have these heavy-handed governments that placed big, aggressive bets, like Germany, on the energy portfolio. Instead of being an all-the-above energy portfolio, let the free markets continue to evolve and make sure we have affordable, reliable energy. They shut down their nuclear plants. They shut down their coal plants. Guess what? Germany is in trouble. These other countries are as well. They're facing soaring inflation rates and a constrained energy supply, and they're looking for a way out of this. It's a mess. We can't let the United States follow that same path of Europe.
And so, Michael, you helped form the Bitcoin Mining Council. You're intimately versed in all things Bitcoin, from what you're doing at MicroStrategy to the mining end of the equation. Same question to you. Like, are we, doing ourselves a disservice not having a coherent policy around this, or is it good to let states kind of go it alone?
Well, I think Bitcoin is really digital energy, and the United States grew to prominence by mastering oil, which was liquid energy, and then we rolled out, remember the rural electrification program? It was rolling out electricity everywhere in the country, and then we had highways, and we had a nuclear power program, and we won a war based on atomic energy. I think that we should embrace digital energy. It's possible some states won't embrace it as enthusiastically as others, and that'll be to their detriment. But I think that if you look at the rise and fall of empires, you want sea power, you want air power, you want space power, you want atomic power, you want cyber power. And Bitcoin is cyber power, and it's in the best interest of the nation to embrace it.
Now, let's specifically look at Texas. And I know that there are earlier panels that got into the nuances of how Bitcoin mining can help stabilize a power grid, how it can create a financial incentive for off-grid renewables. So we won't get into all of the details there. But what are lawmakers in Texas and places like Wyoming doing right? And is there a template there? Are there other things that lawmakers in other states should be looking to do to be more proactive in this space?
Well, it's called freedom and allowing states to compete. I mean, first we start from a national viewpoint here to make sure we are free and have an environment that promotes competition and free markets. Now we have the states, state-to-state competition. That's a good thing for our country. Mm-hmm. They're promoting freedom. And the challenge we face when you have a state like New York, which is trying to dictate whether it's a proof of work type of mentality or proof of stake, that is not the business, in my opinion, of a state legislature, because that'll drive jobs away from a state like New York. And this is the problem. You have scarcity of energy mentality created by having government very heavy-handed energy policy. We got to think about renewable energy, and I think wind and solar are great, but use that to expand our energy portfolio, not the replacement strategy. That's the mistake that Germany has made in other European countries, is putting them at a great disadvantage for the rest of the world.
Texas has a deregulated power grid, so you've got all these power producers who are competing on price. Other states don't have a similar setup. Texas also has ERCOT, which covers about 90% of the state. Does that put it at an advantage? Like, can other states compete? Is Texas going to be the de facto capital of Bitcoin mining in the U.S.?
Well, Michael, you better take that one.
Everybody's going to compete. Georgia's he's got the lead right now. Texas is probably number 2. I think the Bitcoin mining is going to spread all around the country. And the most important thing is for us to educate politicians, because what Bitcoin is a digital commodity, and the way you create that commodity without an issuer, and it's really critical to create it without an issuer, is you modulate electricity through a SHA-256 mining rig run it on a Nakamoto consensus network. And if you manage to do those three things with a network that's been ethically launched, that is without an ICO and without a controlling issuer, then what you have is a commodity, and you've got, in essence, a block of digital energy. If you can do that, then you can move energy at the speed of light between 50 billion computers, millions of times a second. And if a politician understands that, they understand you want to have digital energy in your state. You want companies that produce it, like miners. You want companies that manage it and bank it, like the banks and the money and the Bitcoin banking applications. You want all the functional applications on top of it. And I think the United States has a lead right now, and they'll continue to have a lead if we don't get hostile regulation.
Well, in terms of that last point, hostile regulation, and the last thing I'll say on New York, I've spoken to some people who think it's contained. New York has always kind of kept that same stance toward the crypto industry. So it's no surprise that they would be pursuing this kind of legislation. I speak to other people who say, hey, this is creating a template for other states. New York is often a first mover. Is that problematic? I mean, Senator, you don't think so. Michael, do you think that there's an issue here if New York puts the kibosh on new?
I think it'd be bad for New York. I don't think it'll make a difference in the United States. It'll be like the Chinese when they banned Bitcoin mining. It just made Bitcoin mining more profitable everywhere else. And the game theory says that the most rational jurisdictions are the ones that benefit from new technology. It would be about as rational as New York banning electricity or fire or steel. Right? And so you laugh, right? The only reason you laugh is you understand fire, electricity, and steel. People that don't understand digital energy or how you got it and why it's special, they don't realize that when they toy with Bitcoin mining bans, it's like just as silly as banning someone from the internet or banning them from having electricity in their homes.
But what you want to have, too, is you want to let science drive this discussion and not politics. Give an example. When I first came back into Congress, you mentioned I was in the private sector for most of my career. I came back to Washington and found out that hydro was not considered a renewable source of energy. Was not considered renewable. Now, I'm from a state that has huge hydro capacity.
33%?
And it's very affordable, it's very reliable, and it snows, we ski on it, and then we fish on that same snow when it melts. We also use it to convert water into electricity. And it was not considered renewable. Only wind and solar were. And we changed that because the politics was driving that discussion, not the science.
Now, Michael, part of why you formed the Bitcoin Mining Council was in response to comments that Elon Musk had made around Bitcoin mining's carbon footprint. What have you found so far, and has that guided the way that you interact with policymakers?
I learned a lot from the process. One thing we learned is that Bitcoin is the most environmentally friendly, sustainable industry in the world.
And how did you find that out? People who don't know the methodology.
We actually collected 50% of the network, and we got them to submit their energy usage, the source of their energy, and the efficiency with which they generate the hash rate.
Wait, let me just interject, because I think what people often confuse is that energy consumption is not equivalent to carbon emissions, and so the inputs that you use are very important in determining your carbon footprint. So that's what they were trying to find, not just like, oh, Bitcoin mining takes up, uses the same amount of energy as XYZ country. They were looking at the carbon footprint. So keep going.
Yeah, what we found is that no more than 5 basis points of the carbon emissions in the world come from Bitcoin fueling power plants. And we found that more than 58% of the energy that is used to power the Bitcoin network is sustainable. And that means that's higher than any country on Earth and any industry on Earth. And I just make the point. The only reason this is even a debate is because there's confusion about whether or not you can actually create a digital asset without energy. And the answer is you can probably create a digital security, but you can't create a digital commodity, because a commodity has to be without an issuer, and it has to be open, and it has to be permissionless. And the way you get there is with hardware and energy. You can't get there with just software alone.
But the question, Mac, too, on that is who should make that decision? That's a fundamental question. Is that the role of government to decide whether or not they're going to dictate? If they have a different versus a proof of stake versus a proof of work model here for Bitcoin as an example. That should be the market Digital assets decide that, not the government. It's in their best interest to make sure they find a way to do it the most efficient way possible. And as you can move mining operations close to intermittent source of energy, like, for example, a wind operation, they then can capitalize on the fact when they have an abundant supply of energy, they can't even get it on the grid, but the mining operation could take it. And that'd be a smart way, but the markets will figure that out. Don't let a bunch of politicians dictate it.
But it does help when you're in a crypto-friendly political jurisdiction.
It does, and that comes to the people. Make sure they elect people who are going to believe in free markets and not heavy-handed government.
Quick question, and then I want to get back to mining, but you saw the rise of this crypto voting bloc, and you felt their presence in August when basically a rubber-stamped trillion-dollar infrastructure bill was held up for 10 days by a group of voters that a lot of people didn't even know existed or existed in this kind of force. And we're going into midterm elections, and now you're seeing a lot of candidates running on a pro-cryptocurrency or a pro-Bitcoin platform. You're seeing a lot of money being invested into these campaigns. And my question is, how important is your stance on cryptocurrency going to be in elections going forward?
I think it's really important because it also helps define just a philosophy on government in the private sector and freedom. Mm-hmm. And I think a politician's view on crypto, to me, tells a lot about their philosophy and the role of government.
It is a way of life. I based in Austin for a couple of months to get a better sense of what the tech scene was like there, and obviously it's an epicenter of Bitcoin mining, and it is a way of life in every respect, from politics to family to in some respects the way that you view your faith.
Well, I think too what's happening is there may have been some individuals that may have been more disengaged from the political process, but they realize that elections have consequences, elections drive policy, and people got to get out and vote here for those who believe in a lighter touch of government versus a heavy hand, and there's a pretty big philosophical difference right now.
Now, right now, the last few weeks, the crypto market has been in turmoil, so we've seen prices drop. Part of that had to do with the failure of one of the more popular stablecoins that's pegged to the price of the US dollar. I bring this up because price volatility has always been there, of course, with respect to coins like Bitcoin, and it affects the profit margins for miners. And on an earlier panel today, Kevin O'Leary brought up the fact that a lot of these publicly traded mining companies are down 60 to 80%. And my question is, if Bitcoin mining, all this infrastructure has been built up, and if we're also saying that it can, help fix a lot of the problems with energy infrastructure in the U.S., what happens if there's less of a price incentive to run these data centers? Does that solution just go away?
Well, I think one of the great sources of integrity and security to the Bitcoin network is about $20 billion worth of mining infrastructure spread across the entire industry around the world. And that's permanent capital that generally has a useful life of 6 years to 8 years. And the near-term price fluctuations aren't going to cause anybody to back away from that because they've got a long time frame. And that's different than, say, a proof-of-stake network like Luna and UST, where you could stake coins and pull them out in 30 days. And so if you think about having capital locked up for 30 days versus capital locked up for 72 months, you can see how the natural frequency of the network is such that you really want permanent capital and you want a commitment from corporations to the network. That's actually one of the things that makes Bitcoin special.
And Senator, how do you feel about that? Does it make you nervous? If Bitcoin dips down to lows that we haven't seen in a while?
You always come back to fundamentals, and that's something that Michael Saylor has always been articulating, is the fundamentals. I remember when I was in the cloud computing business, we were getting ready to take our company public, right as during the dot-com bust. Remember, if you'd have bought at 11,700 in the Dow at the top of the dot-com before it busted, we're north of 30,000 still in the Dow today. So the point is, if the fundamentals are there, you've got to be thinking more about the long haul. And long-term investors will be rewarded if they've got the value proposition secure in the foundation, which, again, Michael articulates that so well as it relates to Bitcoin.
Yeah, MacKenzie, it's important to note that if you roll the clock back 2 years, the money supply has expanded about 36%. Gold, the S&P, and NASDAQ are not beating the money supply expansion. Bitcoin is up more than 200%. So for people in the crypto industry that have a long view, take a 2-year view, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, and 8-year view, it's pretty obvious that this is working, and it's an inflation hedge, and it's a source of security For people that are trying to trade in the market, this week, this month, right? They're giving themselves anxiety. If you want to build something to last for the next 100 years, what you need is people in the industry that are committed to the long term. You can't have people trying to get rich quick in a trading scheme that's got a 1, 2, 3 week duration to it.
We have a generation that's never experienced a bear market. They've only seen a market up, 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 up. And the bottom line is you take a look at the history of markets, there's ups and there's downs on it. You got to come back to the fundamentals. The fundamentals are there, you'll be rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, with respect to, this panel is all about how can proof of work mining, potentially help fix our energy infrastructure. And part of we've looked at a lot of the utility and how that actually happens, but part of the problem is just optics, right? And so you have a lot of folks that are hesitant to say that they have skin in the Bitcoin mining game, and I'm thinking specifically of oil and gas majors who have these very aggressive targets to lower their flare gas numbers each year, and Bitcoin mining is a huge help toward achieving that goal. And suddenly, people are starting to come out with that news. ConocoPhillips was doing it in the Bakken. Exxon is also doing this. And you saw that there wasn't much blowback in terms of, the share price. This news comes out, and stock is doing just fine. So it seems like some of the stigma has been removed from that. And I bring up the oil and gas sector in the context of potentially lawmakers who are afraid to, integrate Bitcoin miners onto the grid because there are still so many pieces that come out, so mainstream media coverage that comes out that says, grid capacity is being overwhelmed by Bitcoin miners. This is taking down our energy infrastructure. They're taking power away from households, and that is the biggest critique that comes up when people hear about Bitcoin miners being added to the grid. Is that a narrative that you are looking to combat in Montana? How do you address education around the industry?
Well, you go back though. It was heavy-handed politicians. Look what happened in Germany, shutting down reliable source of energy. This is happening in our country as well. And it moved from an abundant supply of energy to possibly scarcity mentality. We've got to fight back against that. That's why we've got to come back to fighting for good energy policy, truly all the above energy. We have easy ways to solve this problem as long as government gets out of the way here and allows these markets. You look what happened in the downturn of the oil industry. What happened is they started to figure out fracking, they started to figure out the breakthrough innovations. It's the innovation that'll get us back on track, not the hand of government.
In terms of outlook, the long-term view on Bitcoin mining, is it on-grid, is it off-grid, is it on-grid, but you're asked to comply with miner-specific regulations like what we see happening with ERCOT right now? Is it banned in Western nations and you only see it happening in petrostates? What are we looking at 5 years from now? And is America still the leader if it stays put?
Bitcoin mining's, it's the ultimate 21st century clean export industry. So anybody in the world that has stranded intermittent energy that they can't monetize any other way is going to be staring at Bitcoin mining as a solution. It's probably one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive industries in the world. So it's going to be a dynamic, very, very rapidly evolving industry, always seeking the best source of energy on the edge of the grid. And that's what keeps it healthy. If it gets banned in North Korea or Cuba or China, if they don't like it, it's just going to migrate to a favorable jurisdiction. When the energy gets too expensive, it's going to migrate to a cheaper energy source. And there won't be a shortage of energy. It's running on 0.1% of all the energy in the world. There'll always be enough energy. Ultimately, this is a technology business, which is getting 18 to 36% more efficient every year. So the fight is going to be who can get the SHA-256 mining rigs installed. And if you can get a data center to do Bitcoin mining, it's going to be one of the great businesses. And there's a lot of maneuvering right now.
It's interesting, just looking at the projection over the next 30 years. Today, wind is about 8% of our nation's electric supply. In 30 years, the estimate will probably be up to 15%. So the point is that you've got to have an all-of-the-above energy portfolio to continue to fuel this economy. And it'll be, again, I think it'll be political threats will be the far greater problem in this country than will be the science. We led the world in CO2 reductions as really because of hydraulic fracturing. We had double-digit decrease in CO2-related emissions related to energy because of fracking. The green movement doesn't want to hear that.
We have 40 seconds, so I'm going to use that time. I am curious, how repurposable is Bitcoin mining infrastructure, and does the existence of Bitcoin mining create an energy infrastructure for other green purposes like hydrogen production? Just one of you just like finish that up, because I am interested in
Bitcoin
other
mining
use
is just a
cases.
great complement to anyone in the energy business, whether you've got stranded natural gas or intermittent wind or hydro energy or some other power source you can't monetize.
Such a pleasure. Thank you both for speaking with me about this topic, and thank you all.